Hi friends, welcome back to our lectionary preview that helps you prepare your heart and your mind for worship this weekend. And this weekend is a special one. It's the festival of Christ the King, the final Sunday of the church year. It's a day when we proclaim Jesus as Lord and King, but not the kind of king that the world expects. The prophet Jeremiah once promised a ruler who would execute justice and righteousness in the land. Yet in this week's gospel from Luke, we learn that promise arrives in the most ironic way possible. Not in a palace, not on a throne, but on a cross. The King of Kings is executed between two criminals, and through that death, Jesus opens the door to paradise. So today we're going to explore what all that means. And we begin with Jeremiah's promise. So in our first reading, Jeremiah comes from a moment of political collapse. Israel's kings, the shepherds, they've failed the nation, and they've scattered the flock, abused their power, abandoned the marginalized and the vulnerable. And so the prophet here is condemning these leaders, but he's also promising a new kind of king. Jeremiah calls it a righteous branch who will execute justice and righteousness in the land. In the Hebrew, justice means setting things right. And righteousness means right relationship with God and with our neighbor. So Israel, the people of Israel, they longed for a king who would finally rule with fairness and compassion and courage. Someone who would gather the scattered people and heal what was broken. But here's the irony. When the true king finally appears, he does not take the throne. He takes the cross. And so Jeremiah's dream, it comes true, but it comes true in a place where no one expects. And that leads us into our gospel reading from Luke 23, where we go straight to Golgotha, the place of the skull. We generally hear this on Good Friday, but we also hear it today on Christ the King. Jesus does not look like a king. His crown is made of thorns. His throne is a cross beam. And there's a royal inscription atop of him that says, "This is the King of the Jews." It's meant as a joke. It's meant to be cruel satire. But here is the heart of Christ the King Sunday. That Jesus' kingship is revealed not in power or domination, but in the self-giving love of God. Not in overpowering strength, but in sacrificial mercy. Not in the leaders, political or religious, not in the soldiers, not even in Jesus' followers, his disciples who recognize it. Where we find this is in a dying criminal. A dying criminal who has no power to bargain, no future to offer, no resume of good deeds done in his life. He has nothing, but he has one prayer. Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom. And our Lord, he responds with the most kingly act of all. He says, Today you will be with me in paradise. The first person to truly see who Jesus was and is always going to be is not some faithful disciple or some wise scholar. It's a desperate sinner who cries out for God's mercy. I mean, throughout the Gospels, people have constantly misunderstood Jesus. They want him to be this political liberator. They want him to be a miracle worker, a fixer, a warrior, a healer on demand, a bread baker, a spiritual life coach. I mean, even the disciples, after watching Jesus preach and heal and cast out demons and calm storms, they don't fully get who he is. You could call it a case of mistaken identity. They're looking for a Messiah, but they're looking for a Messiah who fits their wishes and solves their problems. And if we're really honest with one another, we do the same thing. Because we want Jesus to erase our pain. We want a king who cleans up our messes and does it instantly. We want a miracle. We want a working superhero who fixes everything with the snap of his fingers. But the real Jesus, the King of the cross, does something far more profound. He walks with us through the darkest valleys instead of airlifting us over them. He teaches us that the path to life often runs through sacrifice and humility and service. And he shows us that the kingdom he brings is not about our comfort, it's about our transformation. So you've got our first reading from Jeremiah, you've got our gospel reading from Luke. Now let's look at the second reading from Paul's letter to the Colossians. So if Luke is showing the humanity of Jesus crucified, then Colossians here is revealing the cosmic Christ. Paul writes, he is the image of the invisible God. In him all things hold together. Through him God was pleased to reconcile all things. This is what we call in the church Christology, the language of the universe of the Creator that bends towards God's grace. And if you think about it, the same Jesus who hangs on a cross on Golgotha is also the one whom the galaxies spin. The same king mocked by soldiers is the one who holds every atom, every molecule together. The same Lord who dies between two criminals is the one who is reconciling the whole of creation back to God. Christ the King is not just the ruler of heaven. He is the ruler of our every breath, our every beat of heart, of every rising and setting sun. And yet, Jesus uses that power not to crush his enemies, but to forgive them. Not to destroy, but to restore us. Not to condemn, but to bring the whole of humanity back together. That is the King that you and I worship. So, what does this mean? What does this mean for the disciples of today, you and I? Well, it means we spend our lives learning slowly, imperfectly, to see Jesus as he truly is. He is not the Jesus of our preferences. He is not the Jesus of our anxieties. Rather, he is the Jesus who comes to us in humility and in love. It means we look for Jesus in places that the world often overlooks, and those who are hungry and lonely, and those who are grieving and forgotten. In, quote, the least of these, and the person who whispers to him, Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom. It means that when we call Jesus King, we are pledging to live our lives his way. The way of compassion and service, of courage and love that is shaped like the cross. Christ the King reigns not from a palace, but from a cross. And because of that cross, Christ reigns in our hearts and in our world with a mercy that will never, ever end. Well, thank you. Thank you, friends, for joining me for this lectionary preview. So as we gather this weekend for our last Sunday of the church year, Christ the King, may God open all of our eyes to see Jesus as he truly is. the King who remembers us, who forgives us, who leads us into his kingdom of grace. We'll see you this weekend. God bless you.